Most people think Stoicism is just a mental hack to stay calm under pressure. They tell you don't react, control your emotions, be productive, but this is not Stoicism. What they are presenting is a lobotomized self-help version of Stoicism, tailored to keep you compliant within a sick society. Today we're going to break this illusion, and we are returning to the Stoic philosopher Epictetus to understand Stoicism not as a psychotherapy, but as a revolution of consciousness. And we're going to touch upon exactly what the life coaching gurus never mention: the mysteries, the true nature of the Logos, and the cosmic destiny of the human soul. Modern interpretations trap Stoic thought in three sterile boxes. One is the religious frame, which tries to present it as a pre-Christian moralism, stripping away its pantheistic and naturalistic power. Then we have the atheistic and materialist frame, which views it as a dry stress management technique, ignoring that for the Stoics the world is a living organism and we are part of it. And then we have the rationalist frame, which limits Logos to simple human logic, losing its multidimensional cosmic scale. The four missing pillars of truth. To truly understand Epictetus and Stoicism, you must grasp what modern education likes to ignore. 1. The mysteries. Stoicism was never just a lecture in a hall. It was connected to the initiatory traditions of Greece. In the Hellenistic world, politicians, generals, philosophers, emperors, all could be initiated. There was no separation between the mysteries and philosophy. Philosophy and the mysteries were parallel expressions of the same sacred cosmology. Without the sense of the sacred, the rules of Epictetus become just moral advices. In the Greek world, the cosmos is ensouled, the divine is immanent, the soul is akin to the cosmic principle, life possesses a cathartic character, there is a notion of return, and this is the framework that gives rise to the mysteries, to Platonic philosophy, to Stoicism, to the whole Pythagorean tradition. Not because one derives from the other, but because all breathe the same cultural air. They have their differences, but they were all coming out from the same tradition. 2. The concept of Logos, the cosmic frequency. The Logos is not just logic, and it is not common sense. It is the spermatikos Logos, which means the generative Logos, which sets everything in motion, and it is motion itself. It is the fire that permeates matter and gives it form. And our soul is not some kind of accident. It is a literal fragment of this divine fire. Just as physical fire naturally strives to move upwards, the self, through the practice of virtue, strives to ascend and return to its source. And our inner light is of the same substance as the stars and the universal reason, which is Logos. When a Stoic says live according to the Logos, they don't mean be logical or be rational. They mean tune your frequency to the creative vibration of the universe. Or when a Stoic says live according to nature, they don't mean to go hug a tree. Nature is an expression of the Logos. A Stoic is not speaking merely in ethical terms, he is speaking ontologically. For the Stoics, God is not a symbol, he is the very logos that permeates all things. And of course, this element carries a very sacred depth. Reincarnation and polygenesis. The Stoics believed in ekpyrosis, which is the periodic death and rebirth of the world. And the soul is not some random accident. The Stoics don't seem to believe in reincarnation like the Platonists, but they acknowledged the soul as a fragment of the divine fire, following a cycle of evolution. So your responsibility today determines the quality of your existence in the next cosmic cycle. And while we perceive time in a linear progression, a straight line from a beginning to an end, the Greeks understood time as a sacred cycle. Because we are all fragments of the same divine fire, we are interconnected through the principle of sympathia. In a living body, if one part suffers, the whole organism feels it. Similarly, in the Stoic cosmos, there is no such thing as an isolated action. So responsibility today, it is not just something personal, it is cosmic. The quality of your consciousness right now contributes to the harmony of the entire great year, which is called Megas Eniαυτός. If we accept the Stoic understanding, the great year becomes a cycle of absolute identity, where everything leads to a recurrence of every soul, every event, and so on. If we see the Pythagorean and Platonic conception of the great year is a cycle of harmony, not repetition. It is the perfect number of time that realigns the cosmos with the divine archetype. And this is manifesting as a musical resonance rather than a historical repeat, as the Stoics see it. In the early Christian Platonic synthesis, specifically with Origin, the great year is re-understood through the lens of apokatastasis, not as a mechanical recurrence, but as a teleological restoration. It signifies the ultimate restoration of all things, where the cosmic cycle does not return to a point of origin to repeat itself, but ascends towards the divine. And the return is an ethical and ontological homecoming, in a way, the final triumph of the divine over fragmentation, leading the entire creation back into a state of spiritual purity and unity with the Logos. To be honest, I'm a musician, so I vote for Plato, because in the Pythagorean and Platonic world, the great year is not a loop on repeat, neither a linear procession, it is resonance. In music, when a theme returns, it does not just repeat, it resolves and never repeats exactly the same. It brings the dissonance of existence back into a state of consonance. So from a musician's point of view, the cosmos is not a machine grinding through time, but a masterpiece of counterpoint, forever tuning itself to the frequency of the divine. just like the circle of fifths in music, where a whole cycle gives rise to all scales and all improvisations. To understand the Megas Enneavtos, the great year, we must look at the sacred geometry of the sky. Due to the precession of the equinoxes, the sun moves backwards through the zodiac at a rate of 1 degree every 72 years. A full circle of 360 degrees multiplied by 72 years give us the cycle of 25,920 years. And this cycle is divided into 12 cosmic months. And each month it is lasting 2,160 years. This is a zodiac circle, and each age shifts the frequency of human consciousness. The great year is split into two hemispheres of 12,960 years each. One is the night of the soul, descent into matter, and the other one is the day of the soul, which is the ascent into spirit. Mathematically, this actually aligns with the human body. More or less 72 is the average heart rate, and 25,920 more or less are the numbers of breaths we take in every day. We are kind of like the clock we are trying to read. Democritus, the father of atomic theory, stated that man is a microcosm. This means that the laws governing the galaxies are the same laws governing our own bodies. By understanding this, we realize that we do not just live in the universe, we are part of the universe experiencing itself through a human lens. By choosing the path of virtue, of excellence, you are not just improving yourself. Your responsibility is to keep this microcosm in harmony with the great cycle. We are all participating in the conscious evolution of the universe itself. Peppromeno versus Imarmeni, the player and the stage. There's something very crucial here about our fate. There are two words. One is peppromeno, which is from the verb peprote, and it means what is supposed to happen, what is fated. So this is the stage, the external laws, the body you are given, the era you live in. It is the fixed environment, so to speak. Imarmeni now, from mirome, means to receive one's share and to divide. This kind of the cards you are given, and it is up to you how you choose to play them. True freedom is not changing the peppromeno, it is the mastery of your imarmeni. It is your prohairesis, which means your conscious choice, to take your share and transform it. So, transform it into something conscious. True freedom is not changing the peppromeno, which is the stage. It is the mastery of your imarmeni. It is your prohairesis, which means pre-selection, taking your share and transforming blind necessity into conscious action. You don't choose the game, but you are the absolute master of the moves inside the game. Friedrich Nietzsche once attacked both Plato and Stoicism as a mere copying mechanism for people who have been molested by fate, and he argued that the Stoics call all the external goods indifferent only because they have no power to attain them. And he called it a psychological comfort for the losers. But Nietzsche missed the point. He was describing probably the modern self-help guru Stoic, the one who uses it as an anesthetic. True Stoicism is not about copying, it's about mastery. It's not a shield for the weak. It is the will to logos for the strong. What most people fail to understand today is that all Greek schools, be it the Stoic, the Epicurean, the Platonists, they shared the same unwavering goal. Despite their different methods, despite their different points of use, they operated under a single unified reality. In the ancient Greek world, science was not separate from theology. And this is because Hellenic theology has nothing to do with modern religious dogma. Today, we suffer from two things: from an illogical religion and an unethical science. To the Greeks, the cosmos was a unified field. To study the movements of the stars or the anatomy of a plant was to study the mind of the divine. So physics and metaphysics were two sides of the same coin. There was no blind faith, only the observation of a living, rational, and divine universe. Stoicism, for example, is ethical heroism within necessity, where Platonism is ontological ascent through choice. While I was editing the video, I realized that I had to stop and make a quick parenthesis here. Now, one might reasonably ask, why is this guy making a video about Stoicism while referring so much to Platonism? Surely, he must have mixed them up. The truth is that if we stay on the surface of academic textbooks, Plato and the Stoics seem like rivals. But if we want to touch the core of the Hellenic worldview, we must understand that Platonism is the theoretical bedrock that makes Stoicism make sense. In Platonism, the gods are the intelligible powers that mediate between the one, or the agathon, the good, and matter. In the Phaedrus and the Timaeus, the gods are those who adorn and order the universe. The word dynamis in Plato signifies a being's capacity to affect something else. So the gods are the life-giving forces that keep the laws of nature in effect. In Stoicism, the gods are the logi, that they are immanent forces within matter. Zeus is not an old man wielding thunderbolts, but the cohesive power of the cosmos. Athena is the power of wisdom permeating ether. So both schools perceive the universe as a living organism. For Plato, the world is a living creature endowed with soul and mind, and the gods are the organs or functions of this universal organism. For the Stoics, the world is a body, and God is the pneuma, the divine breath that gives it life. The difference lies in the localization of power. For the Stoic, power is matter in its most refined form. For the Platonic, power emanates from the immaterial and manifests within matter. Yet for both, the world is full of gods. Panda pliri theon, as Thalys once said. All is in motion. And this is the definition, as I mentioned in previous videos of mine, of the word Theos, God, from two verbs, theo, which means running in incredible speed, and tithemi, setting something into place, putting in order, constructing. Consider the term energy, energia, the power that is found within the work, and to ergo means within the work. This is energy. So for Plato, the gods are the causes, the archetypes. For the Stoics, the gods are the energies, the actualization. Essentially, Platonism provides the why, the blueprint, and Stoicism provides the how, the mechanism. When Plato mentions in the Cratylus that the first men named the gods the theus from the verb thein, to run, as I said, he implies precisely this eternal motion and power of the celestial bodies and nature. Where do they meet in practice? In providence, pronia. Both firmly believe that these divine powers are not random. They operate based on a plan for the good of the whole. There is no chance in the way we understand it today in Platonism or Stoicism, only law and order. To understand this, we must look at the Greek word for chance, tύχη. Etymologically, tύχη comes from the verb τυγχάνω, which means to hit the mark or to succeed in a goal. In Greek mythology, tύχη is the daughter of Hermes, logos, reason, analogy, motion, and Aphrodite of beauty. So, what do we have here? What we call chance is actually the offspring of reason and beauty. It is not some kind of a glitch in the system. It is the system hitting a target that our limited human perspective cannot see. While the masses believed in Agathi Tύχη, the good luck, as a goddess of random gifts that they could be, in fact, be taken away at any moment, the philosophers saw deeper. What we today call dumb luck, the random occurrences of life, were known as Hermea, the unexpected gifts of Hermes found within the flow of reality. For both the Stoic and the Platonist, wishful thinking regarding luck belonged to what the Stoics called the indifference, aδιάφορα. Did you find yourself with a great fortune? Excellent. How will you use it with virtue? Did you find yourself in poverty? How will you navigate that state with virtue? So, the circumstances are the hermea, the gifts of the flow, but logos is how you respond to them. As Hippocrates said, everything is divine and everything is human. You cannot understand Stoicism without the Greek concept of the cosmos. To the ancient Greek, the world was not a random machine, it was a cosmima, an ornament of order. Platonism explains the design of this order. Stoicism explains the function of this order. By using Platonism, you provide for yourself the depth that is needed to understand that a Stoic is not just calm, they are aligned with a higher intelligence. Platonism serves as the theoretical bedrock that makes Stoicism make sense. Stoicism is essentially an attempt to live Platonic virtue in the here and now, and that is exactly how I use Stoicism. It is a tool for your everyday life. And then, to understand the mathematical and musical side of life, I go to Plato. Plato says, look upward to the ideas. The Stoic says, look around you and within you. God, the Logos, is already here, within the very molecules of matter. Without Platonism, Stoicism might appear as dry materialism. With it, we see the sacred within the everyday. They are two sides of the same coin. One is the metaphysics of essence, the other the metaphysics of energy. And historically, Stoicism is the child of Socratic tradition, just like Platonism. Socrates is their common father. Plato preserved the divine madness and the ascent of the soul. The Stoics preserved the temperance and kratia and moral rigor. So, to remove Platonism from the conversation is like trying to explain the branch of a tree while cutting off the trunk. This is the Hellenic worldview, where the universe is alive, rational, and sacred. Logos, universal reason, the divine word, not just logic, but cosmic intelligence. Immanence of the Stoics, God is within the world. Transcendence, Plato, the divine is beyond the material world. But then in Plato again we have participation, methexis, the idea that material things partake in the divine prototype. Providence, pronia, divine care and cosmic design. The unity of all things, the web of reality. Stoicism is not a dry manual for productivity, it is a cosmic spirituality. And we often treat these schools as rivals, but in reality they are two different languages describing the same sacred reality from a different point of view. The anatomy of eudaimonia. The ultimate aim was eudaimonia. This isn't just happiness, it is a complex philosophical formula. We have F, and this word represents beauty, the correct proportion, and the golden mean. And we have demon from the verb deo, meaning to burn or to glow, but also to divide and distribute. So your demon is the divine spark within you that distributes your fate. So to achieve eudaimonia is to have your inner fire in perfect proportion with the fire of the cosmos. Γνώθη σ' αυτόν, the return to essence. This is the famous phrase, know thyself. This journey towards the F, the goodness, requires a return to the self. In Greek, the word for yourself is σε αυτόν, and this isn't a pronoun. It isn't just a pronoun. It is a manual for existence. Σε is a reflective root indicating an action that turns back upon the subject. And αυτόν means the same or of the very essence. So, σε αυτόν literally means the very self towards which I return. The modern world forces us into a permanent state of exile. We are always looking outward, distracted by social media, by career, by consumption. But the Greek path is a centripetal motion. To find truth, you must turn back and return to the original, uncorrupted identity, the αυτόν. And this αυτόν has been buried under layers of social malware. When you understand that science is the study of the divine order and that the self is the destination of your own internal revolution, you realize that Stoicism is not just about copying, it is about reintegration. You are returning to the F, which is the correct measure of your existence. You are no longer a fragmented consumer of ideas and beliefs. You are a conscious cell in a living, breathing, and rational divine universe. Know thyself was not an advice for introspection. It was a command to return to the source of your very power. And this was the core principle of every Greek philosophy school. Some had different methods, some were extreme. But this is actually great for us now because we can cherry pick what works for us as an individual that works with our character to develop ourselves. It is not things themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about things. You think that the world is disturbing you. You get frustrated by the news, by other people, by politicians, by the system itself, by social media. But what if none of these are actually the problem? What if the thing controlling your emotions is something much closer to you and much harder to face? People are not disturbed by what happens, but by their opinions about what happens. The human beings are shaken not by events themselves, but by their perception of those events. Reality in itself is neutral. What determines our experience is the interpretation we give to it. When we accept that the world itself does not disturb us, but rather our thoughts about the world, something happens here. We reclaim the power to change our perception and therefore our inner state. Think, for example, how we suffer and how we surrender our peace to stupid events. Imagine you are driving and someone cuts you off in traffic. Some people will get furious about this. He doesn't respect me or whatever. If you view it as a personal attack, you will feel rage. But if you view it as a stranger who's perhaps in a hurry or simply made a mistake, your peace remains intact. Or think of a workplace scenario. You send an important email to your manager and they don't reply for 5 hours. If you start thinking that they are ignoring me, am I going to be fired? My work isn't valued. You have an anxiety that is coming from a story you are telling yourself about this silence. Or another example, someone comes to you shouting, offending you, and straight away your heart rate rises and you feel the urge to lash back, and then you lose control. But what is the situation here? We have a person out of control who is making loud noises, using words. What is your thinking at that point? I'm being humiliated, this person is harming my reputation or whatever. And then what is happening? You lose control as well. But if you had not lost control, you would be in charge of the whole situation. When you realize that another person's fury is a reflection of their internal chaos and not a definition of your worth, the offense loses its sting. And you recognize that they cannot hurt you unless you collaborate with them by believing their words, and that their words have power over your character. So it's what we said before. The moment you react impulsively and emotionally, you have lost control. You have allowed them to bring you exactly where they want you. In their fury, they seek to provoke what? A mirror response. If you give it to them, you have handed them with the keys to your internal fortress. If you maintain your composure, which is called ataraxia, calmness, you will achieve the best possible result. By remaining calm, you don't just protect yourself, you effectively put them into their place with far greater ease, as your silence or your measured response acts as a mirror of their own lack of self control. In the modern world, people often react emotionally to events, situations, without even pausing for a little bit to reflect on the nature of what is happening around them. Social media and the constant distribution of news have created a reality where information spreads at lightning speed, but very few people process, examine, or truly understand what they consume. In the modern digital world, our minds are bombarded with impressions, which in Stoic philosophy we could probably call them fantasies. An impression is just a raw data point, a headline, a notification, a video clip, whatever. Epictetus taught that the mark of an educated person is the ability to withhold consent. What do we have here? The news is a disaster. You should be angry. What would be the Stoic response? Hold on a minute. This is just an impression. Are you the thing you are claiming to represent? Let me examine you before I dig in. In many cases, the so-called news today consists of false information or artificially constructed narratives that are designed to provoke emotional reactions and to divert attention from other matters. It is a form of distraction. It is a modern social mechanics, social engineering, and it is widely known that major media outlets are funded by governments. Every new headline, every trend, every scandal can disturb or excite us depending on which side of the issue we already support. Reality at its core remains neutral. The act of someone throwing a stone is in itself neither good or bad. Good or bad emerges only through interpretation. If we interpret this stone as a threat, then we become anxious or angry. If we see it as a neutral physical action, a movement of matter within space, our emotional response diminishes. In the modern world, many people are disturbed not by actual events, but by the speed and form in which these events are presented through social media. And recognizing this dynamic and reclaiming control over our perception is the first step towards mastering our emotional reactions. The anatomy of prohairesis, from reaction to action. The key to disengaging from this emotional trap is to exercise prohairesis. To understand the word, we must look at its deeper philosophical anatomy. It is not just a simple choice, it is a pre choice. From pro, which means before, and eresis, which means choice after knowledge. What it means is that because I understand the structure of my soul, knowing that I am composed of emotions, of desires and thoughts, I can navigate this interactive environment that is constantly changing and influenced by the actions of others. I have done the inner work. I have mapped out the terrain of my own mind. Therefore, I can pre-select my responses. I know how I will respond to every possible circumstance before it ever happens. So this is the ultimate shift. You no longer react, you act. A reaction is a mechanical response triggered by an external stimulus. An action, however, is a deliberate expression of your character. When you actually manage to master Prohairesis, it's not easy, it's hard. But when you actually manage it, you are not longer a puppet of the world. You are the architect of your own conduct. The philosophy of Epictetus offers us a way to redefine our relationship with the world. When we recognize that our reactions are rooted in our beliefs and that we can actually pre-select our character so that it is not influenced by the external events, we recover clarity and inner peace. That is very much needed to face modern life with wisdom and self-control. Personality versus character, the mask and the engraving. You are not the same person when you are alone and when others are watching. And your opinions change, your tone changes, your values might bend. The question is not whether this happens, but what exactly is changing. Define for yourself a character and a way of life that you will keep whether you are alone or with others. The anatomy of the persona. The distinction between personality and character is essential to understand our behaviors. Personality is the outward image we present, and it is shaped by external expectations, by the roles we play, and by the influences that surround us. It is the persona, from the Latin persona, which originally meant the mask worn by actors in the theater. Personality is something artificial. It lacks deep roots and is largely the result of social conditioning, a collection of traits we picked up from our environment. The face we show to the world is a construct that shifts depending on our circumstances. Most of the time, we don't even realize we are doing this and we are wearing this mask. Personality is a superficial defense mechanism. It has social unity, but no essential existence. The etymology of character, the deep carving. Character, by contrast, refers to the essential quality of the self, the core that remains stable regardless of social pressure or whatever. The word character comes from the verb harasso, which means to engrave, to sharpen, or to carve. And in original sense, it was the mark engraved on a coin or the tool used to make that mark. Character, therefore, is something engraved within the soul. It is not a mask that you can take off at the end of the day. Just as carving into stone leaves permanent traces, character shapes our inner foundation. And it leaves deep and lasting marks that are not easily altered by external events. If someone has completely identified with their masks, there is a serious problem. You become a fragmented being, a different person for every different observer or situation. When Epictetus says define a character, it is not about cultivating a socially approved personality, it's about the intentional carving of the self. And this is a conscious process of self knowledge. So, true inner strength arises when we rediscover who we actually are beneath the conditioning. Authenticity appears when we cultivate consciously the character that does not shift with the wind, regardless of who surrounds us or what pressures society applies. We remain grounded in a way of life that we have consciously chosen. This is the true character, and it allows us to live with purpose, with clarity, and presence, whether we are standing in a crowded stadium or sitting in the silence of our living room. The illusion of knowledge, removing the veil of arrogance. The moment you think you already know, learning becomes impossible. Certainty feels like strength, but in reality, it is often the first form of blindness. What is the first task of the philosopher? To remove arrogance, eases. For it is impossible to begin learning what one believes one already knows. The anatomy of arrogance, eases. What is the task of one who seeks wisdom? To abandon arrogance. Epictetus in the Greek text is using the word eases. It comes from the verb iome, which means to suppose or to imagine. So eases is the inflation of the ego, the unexamined belief that our subjective opinions are objective truths. Philosophy begins with the removal of this pride. When we believe that we already know everything, we block the very possibility of growth. And the first step towards wisdom is the recognition of this ignorance. As Socrates famously showed, the only true knowledge is knowing that you know nothing. And this is something incredibly relevant today, especially when we see it through the lens of the modern educational system. Students receive knowledge through multiple levels of filtration: teachers, textbooks, and secondary sources that are very often far removed from the primary material. And the result here is a form of knowledge that is frequently incomplete or distorted, but it is endlessly repeated without ever being questioned. The system prioritizes exams, passing exams, and acquiring degrees over genuine inquiry. True learning, critical thinking, the comparison of primary sources, and deep understanding is rarely encouraged. Instead, students are trained to absorb and reproduce information. And this reminds them the game of the broken telephone. Knowledge is passed from one voice to another, and gradually it is distorted and rarely verified. So people grow up believing that they know, and they carry certainty without understanding. But once they begin questioning and returning to the original sources, that's when the contradictions appear. Think of a human being like a computer. If a computer has been infected by malicious software from the internet, it begins to slow down. And often this system lag happens so gradually that the user doesn't even notice that the computer is lagging until the machine is almost unusable. And this is exactly how social conditioning works from early childhood. Software is installed in us. And these are the beliefs, the ideologies, religious dogmas, or scientific doctrines. And we carry these files without ever checking for viruses. And these programs come and reside in the first three segments of Plato's divided line. Ikasia, which is imagination, living through shadows and appearances. Pistis, which is belief, accepting social or religious norms without any proof. Diania, which is reasoning, and here we have scientific or mathematical thought that still relies on unproven assumptions. True Eudaimonia only begins when we transition to the fourth segment, which is Noesis. This is intuition or intelligence, holistic knowledge. This is the moment you delete the useless software and finally start running your true original operating system, the Logos. The multi-dimensional nature of Logos. The Greek word Logos is not easily translated into a single English word. It is a profound, multi-layered concept that defines all Hellenic philosophy. Logos is reason, the ability to think logically and discern truth from falsehood. Logos is speech, the power to express complex truths and engage in a meaningful dialogue with someone. This is dialectics. Logos is proportion, the mathematical harmony that governs the universe, the cosmos. Logos is account, the ability to give a rational explanation for why you believe what you believe, and Logos is also movement. It is the dynamic flow of the mind and the cosmos. It is the movement from the one to the many and from the many to the one. And this final definition is perhaps the most important, because in the Hellenic tradition, the Logos is the force that allows us to see the underlying unity, the one, within the chaotic diversity of life, of the many. When you observe 1,000 different events, and you can start perceiving the single principle that connects them, you are exercising Logos. So when you take a single truth and then you see how it manifests in 1,000 different ways in your daily life, you're again moving through Logos. When you operate through this operating system, you are no longer a passive machine running infected scripts. You become an active seeker, and you transition from a state of being programmed by society and by your own confused impressions to a state of being self-determined. And you move from the stagnation of certainty to the living, breathing movement of the truth. The lag occurs when you cannot distinguish what belongs to which part of your soul. You mistake a desire for a need. You mistake an emotion for a fact. You mistake a thought for your identity. To be self-determined is to achieve internal clarity, to know exactly what's coming from your thoughts, what's coming from your emotions, and what's coming from your desires. Only then you move from this stagnation of certainty to the living, breathing movement of the truth. Modern education often reproduces certainty and stagnation. Instead of training independent thinkers, it encourages passive acceptance. And this is why Epictetus remains vital today. To seek wisdom, we must shed arrogance, start from zero, and purge the malware of our upbringing. All of this, however, must unfold alongside self-knowledge, because in the end, knowledge converges, as we said, where it began, in the self.